Since her first appearance in Arcane, Jinx stands out visually and emotionally. The series, inspired by the League of Legends universe, offers a more detailed and emotionally complex version of the character, who, in the games, is known for her chaotic behavior and unpredictable explosions. But Arcane goes far beyond this. Rather than just being an eccentric or violent figure, Jinx is presented as a profound reflection of the devastating effects of trauma and loss. Jinx's aesthetic is emblematic. Her vibrant blue hair, stylized clothes, and insane gaze define her unique identity. However, this striking look acts as a shield, a form of protection and, at the same time, a display of strength. Her unpredictable behavior and uncontrollable laughter immediately capture the audience, but her hidden vulnerability holds the character's true power. Jinx is more than a stylish villain. She symbolizes how chaos and suffering can walk hand in hand. Jinx is built around a powerful duality. She is chaotic and dangerous, yet her actions reflect a desperate attempt to cope with her past wounds. Arcane shows that Jinx wasn't born chaotic. She was shaped by experiences of abandonment, guilt, and loneliness. This approach provides a rarely seen perspective in animations, where villainous characters often follow more simplistic archetypes. Instead, Jinx shifts between heroine, victim, and antagonist, creating a visceral connection with the audience. With Arcane, Jinx takes on a role beyond mere entertainment. She emerges as a mirror of real emotional struggles that many people face: the difficulty of accepting who they have become after trauma, the search for love and validation, and the struggle to find one's place in a world that constantly rejects them. This contrast between external strength and internal fragility establishes Jinx as one of the most complex characters in Arcane's universe, and one of the most fascinating figures in animation history. At the start of her journey, Jinx is still known as Powder, a sweet, needy girl desperate for acceptance. Little Powder lives in the shadow of Vi, her older sister and role model, who protects and supports her. This bond between the two sisters forms the basis of her emotional security, and Powder tirelessly seeks Vi's recognition and the acceptance of their friends, wishing to be an active part of the group. However, despite her efforts, the girl is often excluded due to her insecurity and, at times, lack of skill. The need to be valued leads Powder to make impulsive mistakes in search of validation, trying to prove to herself and others that she deserves a place among them. This desire to belong is both her strength and her greatest vulnerability, and it is exactly this characteristic that makes her transformation painfully tragic and inevitable. The audience follows, with empathy and a certain apprehension, Powder's anguish and her failed attempts to be seen. This path takes a dark and irreversible turn when a tragic event shakes the group, and Powder believes she is the main culprit of the ensuing tragedy. At this crucial point, Vi, in a moment of despair and pain, distances herself from her sister instead of comforting her, which to Powder feels like a true sentence of abandonment. This severing of their bond marks Powder's transition into Jinx, as the girl who once sought acceptance and love now finds herself engulfed in loneliness and guilt, feeling unworthy of any affection. Pain and guilt, combined with the feeling of rejection, transform into an emotional fuel that feeds the birth of Jinx. This new self is a response to trauma, a way of surviving in a world that seems indifferent and cruel. Jinx emerges as a chaotic and self-destructive persona, someone who turns her suffering into unpredictable and explosive actions, trying to stifle the vulnerability and sweetness of Powder. This new identity is both a defense and a renunciation of her former essence, an attempt to forget the fragile girl who still lives inside her, but no longer feels worthy of existing. From this point on, the audience understands that Jinx is not a mere change of name or attitude. It is a new life created to cope with a devastating pain that Powder alone could not bear. This brutal and painful transition becomes the starting point for the chaotic and intense character we know, but at the same time, a constant reminder of the vulnerable girl lost in the process. With the emergence of Jinx, the series reveals a personality marked by duality. She is both powerful and completely unstable, a combination born from the emotional wounds she carries. Jinx uses chaos as a form of defense. Her violent and unpredictable behavior is, in fact, a way of surviving and protecting herself from the unbearable pain of the past. Each explosion and destructive act is an expression of her repressed pain, something she turns into action so as not to be consumed by the guilt and loneliness that haunt her. For Jinx, chaos is a shield against vulnerability and a cry of revolt against the world that hurt her. In each impulsive act, there is an attempt to reaffirm her new identity, a painful and dark identity that makes her feel in control. Jinx does not act randomly. She is constantly fighting to bury her suffering while, at the same time, claiming a strength she believes she did not have as Powder. It is as if, by becoming Jinx, she could finally control her pain instead of being consumed by it, even if this takes her down a path of destruction. This constant struggle between who she was and who she has become creates a devastating emotional tension. Deep down, there are still traces of Powder in Jinx, the sweet girl who only wanted to be accepted, but this side is suppressed by a sense of despair and the need to survive. The audience perceives this duality in moments of vulnerability, especially when Jinx is confronted with memories of her past or meets people who remind her of her former life. In Jinx, Arcane constructs a raw portrayal of trauma and the psychological impact of loss and abandonment. She is a symbol of how unresolved pain can profoundly shape someone, creating a character who, while terrifying for her unpredictability, wins over the audience by brutally honestly representing the effects of suffering and the struggle for self-acceptance. After the break with Vi, Jinx finds in Silco a complex and essential figure for her new identity. He emerges as a paternal figure, but his relationship with Jinx goes far beyond a simple power bond. Silco becomes, at the same time, a mentor, protector, and manipulator, directly contributing to the deepening of chaos within Jinx and molding her according to his own interests. However, unlike other characters who merely try to control her, Silco is the first to accept her entirely, without questioning or trying to change who she has become. Still, Silco also has his own interests in mind, manipulating Jinx to consolidate his influence and power. He encourages her to abandon any trace of Powder and fully embrace her identity as Jinx, strengthening her most chaotic side. Silco sees Jinx as a valuable weapon, someone who can execute his plans without hesitation, and thus reinforces her destructive tendencies. Therefore, the acceptance he offers is not unconditional. It is intrinsically tied to his own goals and the need to keep Jinx under his control. Silco is capable of perceiving and manipulating her vulnerabilities, creating a complex emotional dependence that keeps her by his side. The relationship between them is both tragic and fascinating. Jinx finds in Silco a kind of family, but this dynamic is based on destructive dependence. Silco encourages her to embrace her pain and anger, and in doing so he contributes to further sinking her into her own abyss. However, it is undeniable that he has genuine affection for her, and Jinx, in turn, sees Silco as a mentor and father figure, creating a unique emotional connection. Vi's return to Jinx's life represents a new point of conflict that rekindles old feelings and deepens her identity crisis. Vi symbolizes the past, a connection to Powder's lost innocence, while Silco represents the new world of chaos and power Jinx has built for herself. This conflict between Vi and Silco is not just external. It manifests as an internal war within Jinx, who must decide whether to rescue her former self or fully accept her new identity. Vi's presence brings out Jinx's fragility. Although she tries to convince herself that Powder is dead, the mere appearance of her sister reopens emotional wounds and generates a mixture of hope and resentment. Vi is the only person who knew Powder and accepted her as she was before the pain transformed her into Jinx. Each reunion between the two sisters places Jinx in a position of doubt and anguish, as the desire to restore her bond with Vi clashes with the fear that her sister will never accept the person she has become. As the series progresses, it becomes clear that Jinx's emotional connection with Silco is a foundation that keeps her stable, even if it pushes her further away from her essence as Powder. Silco becomes a substitute for Vi's fraternal love, but their dynamic is marked by manipulation and extreme loyalty. The bond between Jinx and Silco is a cycle of protection and destruction, where each of Jinx's decisions reinforces the distance from her former identity. The death of Silco is one of the most distressing moments for Jinx, as she is directly responsible for taking the life of her mentor and father figure. During the final confrontation, amid chaos and emotional turmoil, Jinx accidentally shoots Silco, resulting in his death. This tragic event exacerbates the trauma she carries, as Silco was one of the few people who fully accepted her as Jinx. By losing Silco at her own hands, Jinx is confronted with the devastating reality that her own instability and chaos caused the destruction of her last emotional bond. This death marks a definitive breaking point in Jinx's psyche, further amplifying her sense of isolation and guilt. Silco was not only a mentor, but also the anchor that kept her grounded amidst the darkness. He supported and validated her, even with her flaws. With his death, Jinx loses the only remaining bond that connected her to some form of family and support, and the guilt of being the cause of this loss plunges challenges her even deeper into her self-destructive side. This final event leads her to fully embrace her identity as Jinx, a figure chaotic and devastated by pain, with no more ties or restraints to anchor her in a less turbulent life. The moment Jinx ceases to be Powder is not a simple change of name or attitude, it is the symbolic death of an old version of herself. By accepting that there is no going back, Jinx dives headfirst into chaos, using her new identity as a definitive shield against the pain of the past. Every action, every explosion, and every risky decision reflects her choice not to seek reconciliation with who she was. Now, chaos is her way of life, a way to assert her strength and freedom, but also a form of protection against the emptiness that still haunts her. With Arcane, Jinx leaves a deep mark on both the series' narrative and the animation genre itself. By presenting a female character that transcends stereotypes, the series creators challenge the notion that animations are limited to light or simplistic themes. Jinx opens doors for complex characters filled with emotional nuances, proving that animation can and should explore themes such as mental health, loss, and the consequences of painful choices. She leaves a legacy that questions the concept of villain or hero, offering the audience a rich and human perspective on the nature of suffering. Thus, Jinx becomes not only an icon of chaos but a deeply tragic and undeniably human figure. The Arcane series allows the audience to see beyond the chaotic surface and understand the weight of the past and the choices that shape this complex character. The way Arcane constructs Jinx paves a new path for character development in animations. She proves that the genre can explore complex stories and characters filled with emotional and psychological depth. Jinx brings authenticity to the world of animations, demonstrating that the audience is prepared and interested in stories that address serious themes and characters with complex inner dilemmas. Her legacy paves the way for future productions that seek to challenge stereotypes and present themes that, until then, were more frequently explored in live-action productions. Thus, Jinx leaves her mark not only as a memorable character in Arcane, but as a reference for how animation can and should explore the darkest and most real corners of the human psyche. She exemplifies the power of the genre to tell moving, dark stories that resonate deeply with the audience. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps a lot. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Oh, and go ahead and check out the next video that's popping up on your screen. There's more awesome stuff coming your way. Thanks and see you next time.